It had been foretold often that Babylon would be destroyed. However, this chapter records the destruction accomplished. The final prediction of her fall was given only moments before the enemy entered the city.
We are secure from any attack.
One thing they did not realize, outside of God's presence is inside the devil's grip. If your life is not formed in God's character, you will be in trouble. The Euphrates River was their bulwark, and in their great city they had a food supply to last for 20 years. Babylon's doom, written by the hand of God in fiery letters on the banquet wall, finally interpreted for the king by Daniel, came speedily. Brothers and sisters, when God writes, it is serious. Throughout the Bible we learn that the Spirit of God inspires the prophets to write. But this time, God would communicate directly to the king.
As far as I am concerned, only 3 times God writes in the Bible when God writes, it is serious.
The 10 Commandments, Exodus 31:18, Daniel 5:5, and John 8:6. That night the king was killed and the kingdom seized. Thus began the second phase of the fulfillment of the great image of Daniel 2. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before them. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, vessels that the king, his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them.
Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem.
They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. After the death of Babylon's greatest king, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian kingdom was ruled by several inferior men. It was under their leadership the kingdom collapsed, making way for the Medes and Persians. Belshazzar was the son of Nabonidus, and the last of the inferior kings that ruled Babylon. Belshazzar means God protect the king. Belshazzar was a co-ruler while his father lived in Tema in western Arabia, as many inscriptions attest. The Bible declares Belshazzar was king of Babylon. Archaeological discoveries have now substantiated this fact. When she fell into the hands of the Medes and Persians, this was a great feast. It is evident from the fact that 1,000 prominent individuals were present.
On the night of Babylon's destruction, the king and his lords drank strong drinks and did everything else that would prevail in such an atmosphere.
Belshazzar had no regard for the true God. The vessels Nebuchadnezzar had removed from the temple in Jerusalem, Belshazzar put back the temple vessels to be used in his heathen feast. What a sacrilege! What an irreverence! Using sacred vessels, fashioned by men of God after the pattern of vessels in heaven to praise their heathen gods. The controversy between Christ and Satan continued to be fought. While the devil was urging Belshazzar to go even deeper into sin by dishonoring the sacred vessels, God was in the process of fulfilling the message of Isaiah 45 verse 1 and 4. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the 2-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron. That thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which call thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, I have even called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me. Cyrus and his army were outside the walls of Babylon, diverting the waters of the Euphrates River as they prepared. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote.
The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers.
They went to the king as he requested.
Astrologers are people who read the stars. Chaldeans are those skilled in occult learning. Soothsayers claim to foretell the future.
And the king spake, and said to the wise men of Babylon,
Whosoever shall read this writing, and shew me the interpretation thereof,
shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. God had predicted that at the overthrow of Babylon he would strike fear into their hearts. Isaiah 21 verses 2-4.
Belshazzar's face become pale, as the fingers wrote a message on the palace wall.
His thoughts were confused and his knees began to knock together, meaning he was trembling.
Why was the king so fearful, so desperate?
Bring me my wise men immediately!
When the wise men appeared, he promised 3 things to the one who should read the writing and give its interpretation. He knew what would please them, so he promised a scarlet robe, a gold chain, and a position in the government as the 3rd ruler. However, the appearance of Babylon's wise men in the banquet hall was all in vain. For, as usual, they failed in the very thing they professed to be educated in. The king became more troubled and the situation became even more intense as his guests shared his agitation. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. O king, live forever.
And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed.
There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father light, and understand, and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him. Whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, for as much as an excellent spirit, and knowledge, and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubts, were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now Daniel be called, and he will shew the interpretation.
They brought Daniel to the king. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake,
And said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. The king said, verse 15, And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing, and made known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not shew the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make known to me the interpretation thereof. Thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom.
When the tidings of the startling fright and commotion reached the queen mother, she went to the palace hall to advise the king what to do.
She remembered Daniel, whom Nebuchadnezzar had placed over all the wise men of Babylon.
It is evident the queen mother had a high regard for Daniel. She proceeded to outline characteristics which qualified Daniel to help the king in this emergency.
She carefully pointed out that the spirit of the holy gods dwelt in him, so that he had
light and understanding and wisdom, such as the wisdom of the gods. Daniel had an excellent spirit, knowledge, interpretation of dreams, showing of hard sentences, and ability to dissolve doubts.
Furthermore, she assured the king that Daniel would give the interpretation.
Belshazzar took the queen mother's advice and immediately sent for Daniel. He indicated that he knew Daniel was one of the Hebrew captives, and twice he mentions he had heard of him and his particular abilities. However, he did make it clear that if he succeeded, the reward promised to the wise men would be his.
Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another.
Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation.
O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor.
And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took the glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like a beast's, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knowest all this. But hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver, and of gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear not, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified? Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and his writing was written.
O king, the Most High God gave your father sovereignty and glory, but you have not humbled yourself before him.
He assured the king he was not looking for a gift or even a position for the service he would render.
Daniel was now at least 86 years of age. Belshazzar was young, so Daniel took the liberty to speak very plainly to Belshazzar. It is important to know that Daniel, whose name had the meaning God's judge, appeared before the king to speak God's truth. As Daniel addressed the king, he gave some historical background which was familiar to Belshazzar. He recounted how Nebuchadnezzar's position had been given to him by God. He reminded him of Nebuchadnezzar's humiliating experience as a result of forgetting God and allowing his mind to become hardened by pride. Next, Daniel turned his remarks directly to Belshazzar and his actions. You have not humbled yourself. You have lifted up yourself against God. What he actually did was he had took the sacred vessels and was using them in this feast to praise the heathen gods which cannot see, hear, nor know. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they speak not. Eyes have they see not. They have ears, but they hear not. They have hands, but they handle not. Feet have they, but they walk not. Neither speak they through their throat. He totally disregarded God who gave him his life and position. Therefore the writing appeared before him.
And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene of the thing.
Many meant God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tick meant thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting.
And this is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel read the writing, and his interpretation is summed up in 3 words: numbered, wanting, divided. God had numbered the days and years of the Babylonians' kingdom. Now they had come to the end. Tekel in the Chaldean suggested thou art weighed. In Hebrew it meant thou art too light.
Either ways, he wasn't qualified to sit on the throne.
God had found Belshazzar to be vain and empty, unworthy of the trust given to him. Upharsin is the same word as Farsin or Paris. Farsin in the Hebrew meant Persians, and Parisin in the Chaldean meant dividing. According to Matthew Henry's commentary, Vol. 4, page 1060, even though the interpretation spelled doom for Belshazzar and his kingdom, he fulfilled his promise of reward to Daniel.
Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck.
And made a proclamation that he should be the statue of gold around his neck.
He thought that in giving the reward to Daniel would appease the wrath of God. Actually, there is no indication that he believed the interpretation to be correct. However, he was probably skeptic with regard to the intervention of God in the affairs of men, as are many people in today's society.
In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain.
And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
Belshazzar's name, which meant Bel, preserve thou the king, lost its meaning that night. The king's doom was sealed and his life was taken.
The divine decree was executed speedily. There was no delay of 12 months as in the case of Nebuchadnezzar, neither was it partial. Cyrus and his army had diverted the Euphrates River and were able to walk up the riverbed and come into the city through the gates that which had been left open. Why does the scripture indicate that Darius the Median was the one who overthrew the Babylonian Empire? There is no discrepancy here when we understand that Cyrus was in charge of the army. He was also the nephew of Darius, the king of Media. At the time, Darius was 62 years of age and ruled for only 2 years before his death. There are some who question the way God deals with different persons. In the case of Nebuchadnezzar, he was given many opportunities and finally, time to repent, he refused. Here in the case of Belshazzar, the story is so different. When his message of warning came, his doom was imminent. In the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verses 27 to 30, God speaks of ignorant sin and presumptuous sins. And if any soul sin through ignorance, then he shall bring a she-goat of the first year for a sin offering.
And the priest shall make an atonement for the soul that sinned ignorantly.
when he sinneth by ignorance before the Lord, to make an atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him.
Ye shall have one law for him that sinneth through ignorance.
Both for him that is born among the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourned among them. But the soul that doeth aught presumptuously, whether he be born in the land, or a stranger, the same reproacheth the Lord, and that soul shall be cut off from among his people. Here God speak of sins of ignorance and sins of presumptuous. It is evident that Nebuchadnezzar's sin was ignorance, whereas Belshazzar's sin was presumptuous. Nebuchadnezzar was an honest man and he repented of his sin. Belshazzar was given light and truth, but he stubbornly defied God. One Christian writer has this to say concerning Belshazzar. Through the folly and weakness of Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, proud Babylon was soon to fall. He admitted in his youth to share in kingly authority. Belshazzar gloried in his power and lifted up his heart against the God of. He had many opportunities to know the divine will and to understand his responsibility of rendering obedience thereof. He had known of his grandfather's banishment by the decree of God from the society of men. And he was familiar with Nebuchadnezzar's conversion and miraculous restoration. But Belshazzar allowed the love of pleasures and self-glorification to wipe out the lessons that he should never have forgotten. He wasted the opportunities graciously granted him and neglected to use the means within his reach for becoming more fully acquainted with truth, that which Nebuchadnezzar gained at the cost of untold suffering and humiliation. Belshazzar passed by with indifference. For more of this, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. While you are there, follow us on TikTok at Jah Ben TV. Thanks.